61% of men and women express a desire to get married, but with a 43% divorce rate, the odds of it working out are a flip of a coin. The numbers show us that men think to leave their partners less frequently than women do. We all know the dating world is a shit show where the risks outweigh the rewards most of the time. On average, Americans will spend $20,000 on dating before marriage, with men spending an average of nearly double the amount spent by women. And all of this begins with a feeling, a moment of eye contact, or a story reply, a smile, a chemically driven spark, or a courageous icebreaker, or a flirty text reciprocated. Love. Love is the most satisfying reward and yet the greatest risk. That being said, these are 6 harsh truths to tell if you're actually in love or simply infatuated. The first truth is that most people don't actually understand what love is. Falling in love is a complex experience influenced by many variables, including gender. The experience between men and women seems to be different, and I want to break down how each sex experiences falling in love. But first, we can't overlook the mistake that many people make, confusing attention or lust with love. If you get the sensation of desire when somebody gives you attention, especially if you've been starved from it, this likely isn't love. If the moment-to-moment, day-to-day actions that you take don't change in consideration of this other person, then it likely isn't love. So what is love, and how would you know? Well, here are some signs that this isn't your service-level chemistry. Number 1, you think about them regularly. Love often creates a genuine curiosity and interest in the other person's life, and this includes their feelings and overall well-being. This means that even when they're not around, you think about them. They likely come to mind in everyday situations. You consider their feelings and how your decisions will impact them. And you not only consider, but you start to prioritize it. When you start to genuinely care deeply about somebody, their happiness and fulfillment matter to you. The selflessness and care for their needs over time indicates a much deeper connection and a display of commitment. Now, I know a hard place for many men to go is in the space of vulnerability, but this one is important. With the right person, you feel safe sharing your fears, insecurities, vulnerabilities, desires, and you're also interested in those things within them, too. Love requires trust, and the willingness to disclose those things about yourself shows the emotional openness that is required for depth and long-term love. Now, there are some very interesting nonverbal cues that you can pick up on. When you tilt your neck when you're talking to somebody, and I know this might feel trivial, but it is important. When somebody tilts their head in your presence, what they're telling you from a nonverbal place is that I trust you not to harm me. Think about it like opening up the jugular for somebody else to cut. It's terrifying to do, but the right person would never hurt you. Another point that's important to consider with how you perceive this person is asking yourself if there's long-term thinking involved. Not only do you care about having a long-term future with this person, but you're willing to adapt your current lifestyle to make it happen. You'll have thoughts about your future plans that start to include them. And this is an important point because attraction or infatuation doesn't necessarily take this into consideration. And the fifth and final point under this is something that my partner actually told me. He said when he met me, he knew it in his body. And with the right person, it just feels like home. You feel a sense of calm, peace, and joy, not infatuation or chemically driven attraction. The second truth is that many people get stuck with chemistry or connection, but don't get to the deepest layer of compatibility. Concisely put, love is the willingness to sacrifice for the betterment of the unit of you two together or somebody else's feelings. But the lines that contribute to falling deeply in love with somebody, well, they get a little bit blurry. There are 3 really important layers that need to be bridged in order to discern whether you've fallen in love with somebody and that relationship could last you long term. And here I want to break down each of those layers so that you know the person that you've fallen for is somebody that you could build a life with and not somebody who's just going to flip your world upside down. Chemistry refers to the physical attraction and connection between 2 people. And this is driven by both biological and neurological processes. When we think about chemistry, we're looking at infatuation and lust. This is synonymous with the honeymoon phase of love, characterized by excessive thoughts or heightened excitement around the other person. It's fueled by dopamine, a neurotransmitter linked to pleasure, and lust being the intense sexual desire, which is associated with the release of sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen. And these drive physical attraction. Dopamine, associated with pleasure and reward, surges at the very beginning of a relationship. And this can create feelings of euphoria in the presence or at the thought of this other person. Oxytocin and vasopressin are released with physical touch, and these hormones deepen the emotional bond. Now, also heightened at the very early stages of a relationship are adrenaline and cortisol, and these cause the racing heart butterfly experience that you likely have. And this gives you that physical thrill of being around somebody that you're attracted to. Now, as I alluded to, men and women experience this a little bit differently. Men tend to be visually stimulated and experience a higher and quicker dopamine rush than women do. And this can lead to faster feelings of attraction, again, on average. Women often require experiencing emotional and contextual cues in order to feel the same chemical rush that their male counterparts do. And this aligns with evolutionary priorities of safety and protection. Now, connection is the second layer, and this builds when people start to cultivate trust and get to know each other better. The emotional closeness element moves past the surface level attraction that two people experience at first. And this moves beyond infatuation to deeper levels of understanding and support. Shared experiences, vulnerability, and communication are what's required in order to deepen this bond. And emotional intimacy activates the brain's reward system, and this reinforces the desire to be even closer to your partner. Serotonin balances the intense focus on your partner, and this creates a more stable and lasting connection. Mirror neurons help partners empathize and understand each other's emotions, and this contributes to strengthening that emotional bond. Now, when it comes to connection, men and women build this a little bit differently. Men tend to experience connection through shared activities or problem solving, and this builds trust and camaraderie, where women tend to prioritize emotional and verbal communication, which for them fosters deeper emotional intimacy. Now, most people will just get to that level and think that it's love, but this last piece is the most important for anything that's going to last long term, and this would be compatibility. And underpinning all of this is long-term values, goals, and lifestyle, as this will inevitably form the foundation that you build your relationship on top of. Compatibility moves beyond chemistry and connection, and this ensures that the relationship in itself can withstand challenges, as they will definitely come. Shared values, mutual respect, and complementary personalities are critical here. Oxytocin and vasopressin are bonding hormones, and these are crucial for maintaining a long-term relationship. And this ensures the critical element of trust and also healthy attachment. Now, as a relationship starts to get deeper, your prefrontal cortex also starts to kick in. And this is the rational part of your brain that will start to evaluate compatibility. And this balances and levels off the initial infatuation or lust that you might have experienced. Now, where the sexes differ here is interesting. Men tend to focus on the practical elements of compatibility, and this is going to be shared hobbies, goals, and their overall life plans, where women tend to prioritize the emotional compatibility that they experience with their partner, and this is going to focus more on the alignment of deep values between the two. And again, for them, this signals security and the potential for a long-term investment. So simply put, falling in love is not so simple. It's a complex process that starts with infatuation, lust, or chemistry, and deepens over time to connection. Further than that, and essential for something long-term, is compatibility. And the interplay of these layers, shaped by biology and individual experiences, creates the dynamic experience of love, with men and women approaching each layer a little bit differently. Now, the third truth is that we do experience these things a little bit differently, and in order for me to contribute to this from the male perspective, well, I asked my audience and people very close to me. And the first piece of feedback that I received from men is that the first in front of mind thought is, holy shit, I am responsible for this person. And I want to read a quote here from somebody very close to me who has an amazing relationship from their perspective. It's a purposeful intuition of draw to partnership, an intuitive fear of losing identity and autonomy, wondering if you have the proper tools to discern if that person means what they say and won't flip-flop once their relationship is domesticated with pet names and Facebook relationship status updates. Every conversation is another drop into the I feel aligned with this, or shit isn't going to work out long term, and our willingness to listen, to not ignore the latter in pursuit of what feels good acutely. It's discerning between attention and love. It's passing the inevitable tests women will bring to gauge commitment, honesty, attraction, knowing that passing these tests may invite emotional chaos, and having composure amongst these tests that most men fail. It's the crux of man to experience these tests and move through them for long-term love. Now, I want to interrupt this quote for a moment, as I do want to address the test that females will run. Also, I do think that there's a misconception that women consciously try to run these tests to trigger men, and that's not necessarily the case. In evolutionary psychology, the idea that women test men stems from adaptive behaviors in order to assess the level of fitness that their partner embodies. These tests are often unconscious and, again, associated with their evolutionary history and the pressures that shaped mate selection. So here's why and how women tend to test men, if you're interested. Now, first, I know that there's a ton of stigma around women wanting men of status. But here's what I want both men and women to understand about these proclivities. Women are more attracted to, in the modern world, men who are perceived to have more success. And this may look like wealth or material items. But here is why that's important. Women want men who are competent and capable. It is not a big secret that women want to be taken care of, aka providing and protecting. And your success is a side effect of your capabilities and competency. So women will seek out and be attracted to competent men because the side effect of their success or the resources that they've acquired signal that they are reliable fundamentally. So they're looking at the character traits that you would have to embody in order to acquire said things. Because at the end of the day, right, wrong, or indifferent, women want to be provided for and protected by a man who is competent and reliable. Now, they will also gauge your emotional reactivity or stability. Stability showcases how a man can manage his emotions, and women might provoke minor conflicts or present challenges to men. And they're doing this to evaluate how men react to stress, criticism, or hardship. And if a man can remain composed, well, it shows emotional strength. Now, they will also evaluate dominance or leadership. And this may look like them challenging your opinions, or you when you assert yourself, or even observe how you handle competition. And a man who can stand his ground without becoming overly aggressive, or who can lead confidently, tends to pass this test. And I hate the word test, but you get what I'm saying. Now that we've gone through a little bit of how and why women test men, let's get back into the male perspective. It's a gradual letting go of what fuels ego and status while clinging for dear life to who we really are. It's feeling compelled to be what garners more attention or affection while loving yourself enough to be who we are, warts and all, even if that means the end of the relationship. It's a beating in your sternum that feels like a perpetual roller coaster peak right before the fall, and the back of mind fear of what will she do with the keys to the castle. It's a constant fight between what has kept us safe and what is required to experience the depth of love that we know we need to be the man that we are capable of being. It's terrifying, yet we want more. It's the largest reward from the largest risk. Being alone isn't purposeful, yet being together means ripping off that purpose should the relationship go awry. It's the most irrational, rational thing ever. We know intuitively that having it is the nectar of life, while also knowing pursuing it with the wrong person robs life of all nectar. It is a leap of faith akin to Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. And when two people do it, there's no comparison to the depth of life that you experience and the caliber of man that you become. It is the greatest price for the greatest life. So, from men, I want you to get advice from men as well. And the question that I had following up was, so how would you discern between real love and knowing if you're headed off the side of a cliff? And this is the response that I got. As human beings, we rarely get things right the first go-around. And if you ask me, how do I know what love is? My answer is that I know to the depth of my soul what love is not. After operating from a purposeless, empty space that led to conflating attention with love for many years, real love gave me purpose, and that purpose begets new choices being made. At the end of the day, love is a choice that brings intention with behavior. It's continuing to be the man that you portray yourself to be behind closed doors when nobody is watching. It's choosing your partner over behavior that you wouldn't want them to see. It's checking yourself and the gauges on your dashboard of integrity to stay centered in doing what honors your partner 24/7. It's humility to take ownership and practice empathy when previously you would have fought and defended everything. It's courage over and over, and it's forgiveness for your past so that you can give yourself a fighting chance to be the man that you want to be. It's knowing the best apology is changing behavior. It's knowing full body that you are who you say that you are. Real love will drive you to do whatever is necessary to be who you need to be, to protect, provide, heal, and nurture without asking anything in return. Real love will augment purpose, not strip it. Real love means burning the ships. There is zero room for half-stepping. Real love takes time. It's not a crash course to rush infatuation. It's not sexualizing the relationship on the first night. It's not bombarding with lavish gifts to win somebody over. It's not plastering a relationship online for the sake of convincing yourself that this is the one. It's not posturing, and it's not collapsing. It's understanding that being right is the poor man's currency and choosing to take the low road in the midst of a conflict. It's seeking understanding while letting go of the hamster wheel of proving a point. Even when the kids work and life smacks you in the nuts and it would be easier to neglect your partner, it's choosing to wake up every day and ask, how can I best love you today? Now, it's interesting to me that women are believed to be the more emotionally intelligent of the two, especially when I receive emails, comments, and messages like that. There's a ton of depth, logos, and passion. And I also need to add here that these types of men that would leave these types of responses require women who would honor and value those things. And many women, especially those who see men as utility or a means to an end, they're not worthy of those parts of you. And women who will focus on pouring into you without half-stepping or thinking in terms of give to get or rules for thee but not for me. You've probably experienced that. These are women that you can take a chance on, and they do exist. And I also need you to know that if you were to take that chance and it didn't work out, that if indeed she were to be less than honorable with that responsibility, it says much more about her than it does about you, and vice versa. But I digress. Now, the other hard truth, as I alluded to and started to discuss earlier, is that women will run tests, and these tests can feel insufferable and unending. But they do have genuine intentions and purpose for long-term stability and security. They will also test your long-term commitment, ensuring that you're capable and willing and desire to stick around and raise children if so that's what you choose. They will aim to detect genuine interest versus opportunism. And this is why women may delay intimacy with you or ask more probing questions about your values, goals, and what you want long-term. And they tend to also judge your social status and peer respect. And this is where they will observe how you interact during a social situation. So while these tests may feel insufferable, they are adaptive strategies. And while the modern world has updated, the evolutionary foundation of our being has not. And this is why they manifest as subtle or completely unconscious types of behaviors. The fifth truth is probably an uncomfortable one, but men have a lot more to lose up front in the dynamics of dating. And this is why, as a woman, it might feel like you're having a really tough time getting him to commit to you. To be completely transparent, it hadn't necessarily crossed my mind that this was why men pushed off committing in a relationship. And I guess this shines light on the dumpster fire of cross-sex mind reading in the first place. So when reading through my comments and thinking about this concept, it seems that men are a little bit more resistant to love from that angle. And I have to ask, where is all of this restraint coming from? Why? From the male perspective, society seems to diminish the vulnerability of men. And this is also an integral part of falling in love with somebody. And love requires emotional openness, but men who've been hurt or had their vulnerabilities weaponized against them might be a bit more abrasive to engaging with that dynamic. And this can make men appear to be guarded or slow to commit. And many of the men also fear losing their freedom or independence. And they will likely resist falling in love if they feel it is a threat to their autonomy. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that men are expected to handle the brunt of a lot of things in a relationship. They are expected to take the lead in initiating a date or a conversation. And this also puts them in a position of experiencing greater rejection. And this can make them much more cautious if they've experienced rejection over and over and over again to putting themselves out there to find the commitment of love. Now, as I mentioned earlier, men are a little bit more practical when it comes to mate selection. And if they feel unsure about long-term compatibility when it comes to goals or shared values, they will likely delay the emotional entanglement of that commitment. Now, for anyone, previous history as far as heartbreak or betrayal will impact their ability to commit. And this can also stifle somebody's expression of true vulnerability or openness. Now, from the biological perspective, testosterone plays a role in driving the physical attraction that men experience towards women. And this can allow them to prioritize short-term connections over long-term emotional bonds, at least in the early stages. And this is why men tend to appear less emotionally tethered to the relationship early on, though this will change over time as the relationship creates depth. And the sixth hard truth is that if you guys are not compatible, this relationship won't last. The best decisions, investments, and risks come from understanding what is right in front of you. And emotions can be incredibly blinding, and it can lead people to become impulsive or overlook the red flags that they see right in front of them. And even if you do experience them, you will write them off somehow as justifiable. The most important thing that you need to know in the vulnerable dance of attraction, passion, and intimacy is what you need, not simply what you want. Love isn't butterflies. It's seeing kindness and answering it with kindness. It's seeing effort and rewarding it with effort. It's about a positive feedback loop, not a negative one of revenge for what you perceive the other person did without actually talking to them. If you want something long-term, you have to be willing to take the risk and discern whether this person is honorable enough to take your heart and cherish it. And without compatibility, this is where it feels like love is not enough, because love is not a feeling. It is a choice consistently made over time, despite the hardship that you will experience with this person. Because if you had to struggle with anybody, that's the person that you would want to struggle with. Now, if you're struggling with heartbreak and trying to get over that, then I invite you to watch this video. And if not, respectfully, I love you. Don't take this offensively, but fuck off. I love you. See you next time. Good job.